Hello there, and welcome to Stuck in the Middle, a new podcast that me and my friend Tom have come up with, and mainly me. I'm Jake, by the way. Probably should have mentioned that.
Taking all the credit there.
That's good.
Mainly me.
It's more taking the credit, but also taking the blame for when I take it in directions where you go, dude, I want a career. Why have you asked me about that?
For whatever's about to happen here, you're taking the blame. Aren't you?
Where I know one of your controversial opinions and I lead you to having to say it and recording it, and then you go, I'm gonna hurt you. I wanted a career.
I don't want to be labelled as on the left.
Yeah, or on the right. To be honest, I mean,
no, not Hitler.
No. In fairness, actually, which would you probably hate more, being called leftist or probably extreme right? Which is more offensive?
Well, in terms of all the points across all of history, I would probably consider being far right more offensive than far left.
Thank God.
Well, if you think about all the let's talk about it in the KD ratio. No, hang on. Wait a minute.
Let's not devolve history down to a kill-death ratio.
Yeah, no, I think we should. The far right has Germany, Spain, a lot of the South American countries like Argentina and so on. Their KD's pretty high, but the man who's taking the gold home is probably Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong. So probably the left has a higher KD, to be honest.
Oh, for God's sake. Okay, right. Well, it's literally about 2 minutes in and it's already gone to a place where I didn't think we'd get there this quickly.
It's already gone off the rails, isn't it?
Just Jesus Christ. Okay. I think probably at this point as well, it's fairly safe to say that this is not safe for work. This is probably not a politically correct podcast. Probably quite a bit of swearing.
It will be explicit.
And some of it hilarious, some of it damn right scary.
Well, we hope to entertain you anyway.
Exactly, that's the main thing. It's just kind of two guys just kind of sat around really having a conversation about the world.
I feel like we wanted to offer a perspective that isn't seen much anymore, which is the moderate, isn't it?
Yeah, effectively. I mean, that's why it's kind of called Stuck in the Middle. It's very much
because you are
about centrists.
You are the centre left, aren't you?
I would say probably,
you are centre left leaning.
Yes,
and I am, say, towards the right of the liberal, the centre.
I would describe you as centre-right, which even... What I love about politics as well is if you describe someone as centre-right, I've basically called you a Nazi. And that's not what I'm saying. If anything, it's just a slightly more...
I'm a walking contradiction. I'm like a black hole. I shouldn't exist.
Exactly.
I work in the arts, and I'm on the right.
Yeah.
They shouldn't exist.
I know. Well, but also, why shouldn't it? I mean... I was having I can't remember who I was having a conversation with, but it was about basically someone I went to school with, who I won't say who she is because she's a teacher, but her father's very wealthy, and we were talking really about how one probably becomes basically a conservative, basically kind of that political leaning.
They start earning more.
It is literally that simple. You make some money and then go, I want to protect this money.
Actually. I'd actually quite like to keep a larger proportion of that money, and I feel like it's probably as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, especially as well, seeing I watched David Mitchell do a hilarious rant on a show called The Last Leg, basically about the British tax system, and it's a tax system basically based on how much conscience you have, and really you can pay tax if you feel like it. If not, we've left you enough loopholes and gaps that if you don't want to pay, don't do it. Why would you? So
there's a way around everything.
Well, exactly.
Isn't there?
And so when you've got a tax system really based on conscience,
I don't say evasion. I say avoision.
Avoision. I don't say it's evasive. I say it's keeping what's mine.
Well, I think that, according to the law, is the definition in language, isn't it? I think tax evasion is illegal, and tax avoidance is jumping through the loopholes you're allowed to jump through by law to pay less tax.
Which even kind of like just on like a linguistic kind of loophole type thing is absolute bollocks.
Yeah.
Because of how closely defined those two words are. And it's like, how would you... I'm guessing that is why that in a place of law that you kind of... They're like, so how can we prove that it's different?
It's such a grey area, isn't it? Like, how do you define it other than just the government sat in a room going... No, we want that money, therefore we'll call it evasion.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
And it always feels like really small business owners are the ones that get done for evasion.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of avoidance tends to be just kind of like obscenely rich people.
Well, Jeff, no one's doing a court summoning for Jeff Bezos, are they?
Oh God, don't! I mean, this is actually when I probably slip into my more left side on this, where I start thinking about corporation tax avoidance.
Yeah.
Where I'm just there like, this is when I'm very much like, fuck the Tory party, because like, if you just made half of the companies that exist in this country pay corporation tax, you could stop fucking taxing poor people.
It wouldn't matter, would it?
No, it's kind of, it's just logic. It's like, surely it's less work to, well, no, I suppose, no, it's, that is probably what it comes down to, isn't it? It's less work taxing poor people than it is taxing billionaires, because they have law departments and poor people don't.
Exactly, yeah. Like, when you have a team of lawyers that's like 10 strong, you're probably going to think, well, this is going to cost us more money and we're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we're the governmental judicial system, and this could run into a lawsuit into the millions, and if we lose, it's like we've lost a lot of money that we could have spent on other things, like taxing the poor people, like taxing the paupers.
Right. I mean, and also like a case in point of this, I was talking to a family friend who's kind of in a similar area of the arts to me. I'm a filmmaker, as probably the nice thing to say. I was going for.
It's the nicest way to say it.
It's the nicest way to say it, but it's very pretentious. Anyway, that's how I felt about it, and I was trying to think of that word in that time. But we were talking about basically that a company was working for. They'd set up a division of their legal department, and its job was to break freelancer agreements. And what I mean by that is that they'd set a contract up, and they'd agreed to pay a certain amount of money for the service that they were providing.
Yeah.
And then that law department, once they'd finished it, was there to basically to see how far they could break that contract, so how much less they had to pay them. So it's like, if you started off being paid, let's say £10,000, they would then see if they could take 40% off it. So they'd try and pay you 6.
Yeah.
And then they would get in a situation where they go, hey, look, if you want to fight this, it's not a huge amount of money, and we've got all the resources in the world, and you have none, so come at us.
That is kind of the problem, isn't it? That it's like the bully in the playground, and it's like, I know on moral we should stand up to you on moral grounds, but it's just like, well, there's 10 of us, and you don't have the money for this, do you?
Exactly. Well, I mean, and I think that was ironically a case in point of why I found Jeremy Corbyn hilarious, because I mean, I'm going to get straight to slamming the far left if we want, because I feel like I've already laid out my lefty credentials.
I'm quite happy to watch.
Well, exactly, but I mean, I feel like I've laid out my lefty credentials of how I feel about taxing poor people.
My problem with Corbyn was that there was just never a coherent plan for anything.
No,
it was all nice to say, pie in the sky, we'll stop tuition fees for students, but it's like, show me the books, Jeremy. How's it going to work?
Well, that as well. I mean, don't get me. To be fair, universities are ridiculous. I mean,
universities are a waste of money.
They're a waste of money, and also as well, they run in such a strange way where they cost so much money, and the service they give kids is non-existent. Well, it's your most expensive part of your education, and you get nothing for it.
I mean, to be fair, I have to amend my statement and say universities aren't cost effective anymore, because actually I feel like I learned a lot at university and I had a great time. But
Tom, this is 2021. You've said something now and you're being cancelled for it.
Thank you.
And someone sound the council klaxon.
Which ironically is what universities do now. But, rather than being a safe space for intelligent thinking and freedom of thought and research, being bastions of, new ideas like they were, they're just safe spaces.
Yeah.
But that makes me sound quite... That line of talking does make me sound quite far right.
Well, yeah, but the thing with that, I mean, I will defend you on that simply because that as soon as freedom of speech became basically an issue that the right of politics took, then where else do you go with that? Once you've made freedom of speech a right of politics issue, then wanting to express an opinion that's against the grain makes you instantly far right.
On the right.
Almost as a definition.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, well, you're going to end up having to have a statement like that when it's like, oh, I don't agree with what you're saying. Stop hurting me!
I know. I just want to know the point where the switcheroo happened, where it was the left that suddenly became the cancellers who said, we want conformity of viewpoint and everyone to toe this line.
Yeah.
And now it's the right who are about multiplicity of thought and view.
Completely.
I mean, that's how they dress it up. But to be honest, are they just dressing it up as I want to say my dumb thing, so I should be able to say it?
Well, I mean, that's basically what they've had the opportunity to do. I mean, I personally would regulate. Well, no, you see, my problem is I get into a zone of I would love to regulate basically hate speech. So kind of like, if you've got someone who's almost actively a Nazi on Twitter, you should really not let that person start saying things. But at the same point, freedom of speech means that they have to say things. Okay, fair enough. But then on the flip side, then I suppose it then becomes, where do you draw that line? When do you start going down a totalitarian government type thing?
For me, you have to draw the line at, unfortunately, the principle that we hold up as one of the most important cornerstones of Western democracy is freedom of speech. And that will always trump your feelings, because your feelings are subjective, and what may offend you may not offend another person, may not offend the majority of people. And unfortunately, as this nasty thing is that I've just said, which is subjective in itself, again, who's going to say who finds it nasty or whatever, but that ideal, when you say it like that, it seems so obvious that the ideal of free speech has to come above someone's feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I feel like.
I think what we've managed to do here is that we're bouncing between like a ton of points, a ton of different things we can talk about. And I think probably that is a greater conversation for another day, probably along with about 6 things we've just dotted around with.
Exactly.
But the one I'd like to stick with, I'm going to drag it back to me just having a little slam at Jeremy Corbyn, simply because we're going to go on to something more politically based, and I'm going to put some structure into this motherfucker. Okay?
Well, didn't you vote Labour in the last election?
Yes, I did.
So you voted for Corbyn?
Yes, but only because I hate Boris Johnson.
Right.
And I kind of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right.
Effectively.
And I actually voted for Corbyn in the last general election.
Yeah.
Which was 2016, wasn't it?
Yeah. But the thing is, though, there's nothing wrong with voting for hope. That was the thing that I voted for. It wasn't 2016. It was about 2019, I think. It's quite recent.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, because I was in uni.
Oh, right.
I think it was in the last year of uni. So I think.
Right. Well, I didn't even vote in the last general election then.
Oh, good. Well, we've got again another topic. Don't get fixated. It's another topic.
I wanted to vote for a centrist party with reasonable policies, and they're just never going to win.
God, was it when we had that? It was the Lib Dems, because obviously they would be the ones but they had that nut job who wouldn't say that homosexuality wasn't a sin. And you were just there like, well, dude, absolutely keep that opinion, but get the fuck away from modern day politics, because that's not gonna like, you're gonna alienate everyone from you. And because it's a horrific view, to be honest. It's just
well, that's my problem, is that your personal viewpoints are fine as long as they're not affecting anyone else.
Yeah,
that's the major gripe, is you can hold whatever viewpoint you want, but fine, just do it with your life.
Yeah,
stop trying to force it on me.
Exactly.
So,
and that works on both sides of this debate as well, doesn't it? Really?
Well, yeah.
Live and let live needs to be something that we get better at. I think, as a little society. But anyway, back to I'm determined to get this point about Corbyn in. I'm going to do it. So basically, my point about Corbyn that I found hilarious was we were talking about money way back in the Stone Age when this conversation started. But that Corbyn didn't seem to understand that really money was what bought the power. And so by alienating really every kind of corporation around him, basically my feeling was he didn't know how to play the game. And his morals came completely above winning. And my personal feeling is, well, they lie anyway, the other parties. And it was just bend a little bit so you can get into power, then you can make whatever decisions you want when you're in power, but you've got to get into power first.
Well, it seems like the last good stretch of Labour, like Tony Blair, was very good at playing that game, wasn't he? Which is why he went on as New Labour went on for so long.
And he was what? Centrist. There we go.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly what he was. Because I mean, in some ways, Boris Johnson's that bad that I miss David Cameron, and Cameron was a dick. Like that stupid pig fucking European Union leaving. Anyway, so basically, I'm going to try and get to my first question. This was all meant to be an introduction.
Okay.
So I think it bodes well. Really.
So the format for our podcast going on is going to be a series of questions.
Basically it's going to be kind of like the question of the day, and then we will unpack that, and then it's not going to be one of those where we are asked to prepare statements and all of that stuff, because I don't want this becoming like a personal dogma for anyone. I kind of just fresh thoughts and just allowing kind of like a natural viewpoint really to flow, because we're not academics. We're not coming at this like from an essay point of view. We're not researching.
No.
We're just everything off the top of our own head. So I think it's probably best that we don't try and prepare too much.
It's a view from the streets, as much as we are.
From the streets. From the streets. Listen, we'll get into why I don't think we're even close to from the fucking streets at another point.
We're sort of the everyman, the slightly above average education 20-something who isn't necessarily a political science major.
The two straight white men who both work in the arts and have quite comfortable lives. Yes, that's who are in their mid-20s. Yes, I think...
We are definitely the everyman.
We are definitely the everyman.
Well, more what I was referring to is our level of how informed we are on said topic.
Yes, I think from an intellectual point of view, basically. Yes. No, that's fair enough.
It's like I'm not an authority. I'm not a political science professor who really knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, I think and I would say the same for myself.
Yeah.
I should do. I mean, I have a degree in film production, and you have a degree in music, so we have nothing else we can say, really.
So in theory, our viewpoints and all the conceptions or misconceptions that we hold are probably held by reams of other people, which is why it's interesting to discuss.
I feel like what we're doing right now is reading out the small print in the terms and conditions right now of the podcast.
I'm just going over it for the legal shafting we're going to get.
This is called fear. Anyway, so the first topic that I'm going to chuck out, and it feels like I had like 6 questions. I feel like we're going to get through one.
Yeah.
But it's fine. So the first topic is politics and political correctness. What the fuck happened?
Yeah.
Now, actually, I think we've probably got part way to answering that already from just general chit chat. But I'm going to throw it to you. What do you think happened? How did we get to this? Because it wasn't like this 10 years ago.
No.
How did we get here?
Well, I think in terms of a domino effect, everything was pretty moderate and centrist until the first domino in the chain, which maybe here was Brexit. And, well, it's like, if you think of it like a bubbling pot or a volcano or something, there was surface tension underneath for a long time, building a sort of resistance to political correctness. But political correctness was, for the most part, the norm. Or at least having politicians who were moderate and, playing this game, as you put it, was the norm.
Yes, I suppose there was a time, wasn't there, where because social decorum basically was something that you would associate that with kind of old white rich people, basically, and kind of like, you can't act like that in public, that's awful. The Queen will think awful things. And there was definitely a switch point where we went from you can't act like that to hey bruv, you can't say that thing. And I don't know when that happened.
In the UK, I think that point was Brexit, when for me I got switched on to the fact that everyone was now more divisive over everything. It was either you're in this camp and you're with us, or you're not. It was no kind of like, well, I agree with these policies, but these ones seem stupid, and let's have a forum of debate and discussion anymore. It was kind of just the absolutes, and I think as soon as one person started dealing in those absolutes, the opposing side felt the only way to one-up them is to also deal in those absolutes.
Absolutely.
Which was
ironically.
Probably for me, Donald Trump in America, he was just the absolute epitome of everything the left was not. This massive maverick who never did any research or anything and just said what he wanted. So then I feel like the left had to up their game and say, well, if you're not with us, you're basically
against us.
You're basically a MAGA hat wearing, trailer trash Trump supporter.
Yes. Well, I think also as well there, and during that time, speaking of Trump, there definitely was the left got into a bit of a habit of, for example, a rule of comedy is that you kick up. You don't kick down, you kick up. And what the left got into a bit of a habit of was basically somebody who probably wasn't as smart as them, or you could probably, through about 5 seconds of investigation, work out why somebody's viewpoint might not be as educated as yours. And if it was wrong and you wanted to pick apart, basically, that was very easy to kind of work out. It's called empathy, effectively. And during that period, the left kind of went from kicking up to kicking down on people that then didn't have an opinion that they felt was necessary. Ironically, that it came a lot from white people being educated in universities, where they were very much looking at life in an academic way. But then the problem with that is you start kicking down. So you're then basically calling effectively poor, uneducated people stupid. And that was not a good moment of trying to do that. Couple that with the fact that I kind of checked out from politics around this period simply because Boris and Donald Trump just started openly lying.
Yeah.
And like once you've got people in that level of political debate and in that kind of sphere of public awareness, they start lying. What the hell do you do with reasoned debate? Well, how do you argue against that?
I know, and it's a symptom, I think, now, which is common to both sides, is that no one is really held accountable for anything they say, in a sense that, you know how during the presidential debate, they're meant to have people who will fact-check whatever they say. It's actually like everybody knows that they're not getting fact-checked, so they can just say what they want now.
Yeah.
And there's no accountability, really.
No. Which, in fairness, I do think that is then why you get people on the left who, I think a lot of what happens is through pure frustration, but this whole kind of cancel culture thing, where they will, because you can't hold really people in power accountable anymore to anything for some reason. It just doesn't work, really. They go through scandal upon scandal. That's when they take to stuff like Twitter and they look for somebody that they can beat the shit out of because they can't get at anyone that actually matters.
The problem I have with holding politicians accountable is the fact that you have to realise that they're just humans. Because the problem with the modern day society is that people, I think... It's a problem inherent to the job of being a politician, is that everyone expects you to be squeaky clean all the time. And I do as well. I expect the politicians to not break any of the rules, obviously.
Or at least know how many children they've got.
But the fact is, that's just not how humans play it. Yeah. It's like Matt Hancock, who hasn't, decided to kiss
had an affair during lockdown?
Well, the fact is, like, 1 in 3 people get divorced now. And I'm sure in terms of statistics, in terms of who's ever actually committed some sort of adultery or cheating, I'd hazard a guess and say it's probably like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 out of 10 people.
I think it was less about the cheating. I think it was more that he basically got off the TV, kind of go 2 meters space, and then went straight from basically kind of effectively in her face rather than it was more the irony of that.
I understand
was the bigger issue.
Yeah, I understand the context in which he was doing it, of course, but it highlights the greater point that he is a human being, and it's like, as much as I don't care for religion, what Jesus said, it's like, let he without sin cast the first stone, because well, in one way, that's a really stupid statement, because the point I'm trying to drive
I'm going to just let you dig your way out of this little hole.
Well, on the one hand, that is a stupid statement, because it's like, if nobody could ever cast judgment or punishment on somebody without being morally impeccably pure, we wouldn't have a functioning justice system, because everybody has made mistakes at some point in their life. That's essentially what I'm getting at, is we are all humans, and we're holding politicians up to this ideal that they need to be better than human beings, like they almost need to be robots who never ever make a mistake.
Yes, and in fairness, this is what you brought it back very well there. I'm very proud of you. I agree with that, and I think as well we've lost sight of that thing that everyone now thinks the world is black and white, and it's nowhere near black and white. It's a ton of shades of grey.
Exactly,
50 shades of grey. Some could argue, but it definitely.
Because it's black and white in a sense that it's the you're with us or against us type of politics.
Yeah.
And there's no middle ground there in anything. There's no depth of character or understanding anything.
Yeah.
Because for as much in one way, the left love to use these spectrums where it's like people are on this spectrum and everyone is different. They can't seem to apply that basic viewpoint and logic to anything else, where it's like, well, there's a spectrum actually of right and wrong based on what you believe. There's a spectrum of truth, and also there's a spectrum of morality based on what you believe. So when someone's committed a mistake based on what you believe, you may believe they're 70% wrong in what they did, and somebody else may believe they're 20% wrong.
Yes.
So
exactly.
it's that for me, the basic understanding of human nature that is lacking in the left.
I would agree with a huge amount of that, and I'd love to know sometimes what drives it, because I don't think logic drives the conversation a lot.
No,
that. I don't think actually in politics in general. I think logic has left the building, and I don't really know how we get him back in the building. I think he's died on the toilet, but
it's just all about pandering to the voters. That's all it is. Getting the bums on seats. Or, getting the people down to the polling booth for the next election, getting them to vote for you so you can stay in power and do what you like.
But what's kind of scary is vague semi-racism seems to be what the public kind of is voting for. Or like that. Well, I suppose realistically, if you're being kind, you could say that they want honesty, the British public.
Yeah.
And they don't want this kind of superior, I'm on my cloud in the sky going, oh, I'm holier than thou.
Yeah.
They find being talked down to boring, hence about my point about comedy and all that stuff. And that you kind of, if you say really what you're thinking, whether that is something that's inappropriate or not, they do seem to appreciate that honesty.
I think it just highlights for me that the left essentially live in a bubble. And Brexit was the first big wake-up call for that. Publicly, we probably like to think that everyone is very liberal and a certain way leaning, where they're all for multiplicity of view and stuff. But the massive shock was that, in fact, people are probably more narrow-minded and more insular than everyone likes to admit. And it's the real hardcore leftists haven't really ever woken up to this. That they, like, for example, if you go on any social media, because it's always filled with young people, isn't it? It's like every social media platform, all it is jerking off to whoever the current leftist party leader is, or whatever, or whichever politician it is, and making fun of whoever the right wing person is, like the Tories or whatever,
or just Ben Shapiro saying something fairly scary.
And you never see a person on social media, or I don't anyway, in my friendship group, who is right leaning or who is brave enough to say, I actually like what the Conservative Party have done, and or they've made fun of the Labour Party. But the fact is, what the left fail to understand is that they've lost the last 3 elections, and the election is based on the popular vote. Ergo, the majority of people don't think like they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be a slight oversimplification, but I think probably a simplification that is fairly just.
Well, I think in terms of the pyramid, then, it's definitely how the party need to see it at the top. They see that we don't understand how the average person thinks now.
I think it's more the average person is way more self-interested than we'd like to admit.
And that's totally it. Essentially, I think conservatism is a system of for lack of a better way of putting it, self-interest of the individual.
Yeah.
But you could argue then, because they're more interested in the rights of the individual, that in fact they care more about freedom of speech and humanism and all those other types of values than the left do. Because historically, what the left has done is quash the rights of the individual for the benefit of the many.
Comrade.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm getting at. And again, it's this thing of understanding a spectrum. Stalin is like 100% to the left of the spectrum. But then again, it's the same spectrum we're talking about, which says, you know, we all want to identify as a group, like the trans group, and we can't, for some reason, I can't just identify as Loretta. You know, I'm a recent trans person, but in fact I have all these other aspects to my life. You know, I like art, I like cooking, you know, I do long distance running. You know, I'm not just a trans person, I am an individual.
Yes. So you've gone on to identity politics there.
Yes.
As soon as you said trans, I froze up and I started to think, oh God, the comments. Oh, I'm scared. But yes, I know exactly what you mean.
No, I've got nothing against trans people, but probably even I'd imagine a large percentage of them have a gripe that all they ever get happening to them is they're labelled as trans and nothing else.
I agree. A bit like kind of when, well, I think it's less now because kind of people are more like, yeah, so, but like when someone kind of came out was gay, or that they were gay, their personality was, oh, you're gay.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's just who they like to fuck. That's not really their personality.
I know. All that is sexual preference, and sexual preference makes up
such a tiny amount
a
of
small
your
percentage of your personality, unless you're all about fucking things.
Literally, unless you're kind of like Casanova or Harry Styles, like it's kind of, you're not.
Yeah.
You know, and even Harry Styles, I reckon, to be honest, goes either way at this. But I reckon he's just out. You know what? Is it attractive? Yeah. Got a pulse? Absolutely. Cool.
So you know how you were saying before, where did it all go wrong?
Yeah.
I think it was a combination of things that, in terms of the time scale, the radical started to appear, as in the radical ideas like Brexit and Trump. But then simultaneously, it was coupled with the having this identity politics where it's all about groups of people lobbying for the interests of the groups of people alone and not thinking we're individuals.
Yeah, to kind of like give it to an analogy that you'll probably quite enjoy. What's that thing in Star Wars when it's like Han didn't shoot first or something like that?
Oh yeah, Greedo shot first.
Greedo shot first, or whatever.
Han shot first. Yeah.
I think I would argue that the right made the first move, and then the left way overcorrected.
Yes,
basically.
Yeah,
and then they've never been able to get back to a sensible scale.
I know,
and they've only continued to kind of, you know.
Yes, exactly. But
like our expanded universe.
For me, I think the first move. It wasn't that big. You could have recovered from it if you hadn't have treated it with just like, oh, well, they pulled a knife on me. Well, I've got to blow you up with a nuke now.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the level I feel it went to pretty fast.
Yeah, I agree. And it is a shame. And here we are, basically, folks. You then end up with two guys in their mid-20s wanting to make a podcast because it all doesn't make any fucking sense.
Because I think with Donald Trump, it was sort of akin to somebody making outrageous, like, bullying jokes in the playground. It's like, if you don't pander to it, it will go away on its own. But people pandered to it. The left got, they got riled up. They got outraged by it, and that only brought it more media and public attention. And then people started paying more and more attention to it. And then before you know it, he's the president.
Yeah.
Because the left have acted so outrageously badly by. I don't think they ever tried to take the moral high ground. All they did, it's like with internet trolls. So basically, all you should ever do is just not respond to an internet troll.
Yeah.
Because all they want is that response.
Yeah.
And
same like if you're having like an argument with, your girlfriend, for example.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like.
Best thing you can do to piss her off is just say, okay.
Yeah.
Or just not,
oh, no, I'm fine. It's kind of like, what are you thinking about? Nothing. What do you mean you're not thinking about? I mean, I'm not thinking about anything.
I'm literally brain dead, honey. I'm not thinking about anything right now.
My ears are ringing from the sound of my own stupidity.
Yeah.
This is... but I loved the whole Trump... I mean, oh God, we're going back into old territory here with Trump. But the thing with Trump that I found hilarious was actually... I found it less about the Donald and more about how shit Hillary Clinton was.
Exactly.
Like, I still don't know any of what her policy was. Compared to Theresa May, for example, who I do still cry laughing thinking about her being Thatcher's last remaining Horcrux. But compare her to Theresa May. Theresa May was a lefty compared to thingy Clinton. Hillary, sorry. She did not have really any policies. She's a very rich woman, and her only discernible thing that I remember was her point was, well, I'm not Donald Trump. And I'm sorry, but as a reason to vote for somebody, it's not really that strong.
Yeah, her thing was always about, like you said, it's just like, well, I'm not as bad as Donald Trump. That's probably why she lost the election.
Yeah.
South Park had a great analogy for this. They did in one of their episodes where they have, on-call people going around to the houses checking who you're going to vote for. It happens in this country as well.
Polling.
Yeah, polling.
Yeah.
And they were saying, so who are you going to vote for? The giant douche, which is Donald Trump, or the turd sandwich, which is Hillary Clinton? And it was like, well, I know he's a giant douche, but I just don't fancy eating a turd sandwich. And that's sort of the analogy for what happened, wasn't it?
Definitely. Definitely.
But it became like this petty identity thing as well. Like you just mentioned, it was never about policies. It was about highlighting that Clinton was inept because she couldn't keep her emails private.
Yeah. Well, and
that was part of it, that she lost a laptop once with some, confidential emails on it from the White House. And it's like, well, again, coming back to the human nature thing, who's never lost something that was important to them?
Well, exactly. But also as well, as like America is one of those places where it doesn't have a monarchy.
Yeah.
Because obviously it got rid of the British back in 17-something, whatever it was. You probably know the exact number, but I'm not going to ask you.
1777.
Amazing.
6.
We're definitely wrong, so this has been a complete waste of time on that one. But because they don't have a monarchy, the idea of basically having, so if you have Bill Clinton and you're getting Hillary, you're getting to a line of like fucking lineage at some point, and it's like the divine right of kings. It's like, no, actually, I don't want the president's wife to then. It shouldn't be just because your last name is Clinton and that is recognizable. It's like if Michelle Obama runs, I hope she doesn't.
I know,
because it's not. Because your surname's Obama does not mean you're a good candidate.
There's the potential there, like you were saying, for it to become about like dynasties again.
Exactly.
Where it's, they got rid of the monarchy, but all they've done is replace it with this system where
exactly.
I suppose it's different to the monarchy, that if everyone votes for it.
But also look at George Bush Jr.
Yes, exactly. You got Bush and Bush Jr.
That was a shit show.
Yeah.
Like, let's not keep trying to repeat this.
Yeah, and the problem with that is the same as the same as a monarchy, is that it's like if you're born into a certain lifestyle, so because their parents were politicians, that's probably what they aspire to do. And in the same way, they'll just get, because they've now come from money, because their dad's the president, or their mum's the president, whatever, hopefully one day, but, they're shoehorned into that family business, the same way a prince just becomes the next king by right.
Yeah.
And that's the danger with it, isn't it?
That is, yeah. And but also that's the problem in this country, isn't it? And that's why people hate the ruling class. I was going to say the upper class.
I don't actually think it's that bad in this country. Like, there aren't like these families of politicians.
I'm going to say a couple of words to you. The Bullington Club. And how many of them are in the cabinet? Or, well, they were in the cabinet. I don't even know who's in the cabinet anymore because they keep having to fire people because they keep doing inept things like shagging their secretary or, just working. What was the one recently about the scandal of somebody working for another company while in their office in Parliament or something like that?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, how crazy are you? Like, were your expenses claims not enough? Like, you were trying to multitask at work.
Well, see, this is the right part of me coming out now. It's just the fact that if he's fulfilled his duties.
Oh, you're a freelancer. This is basically what you're saying, is that you want to be able to moonlight while,
That's just the logical part of it for me. It's just like, well, if I've fulfilled my duties, I suppose it's different if you're a politician, because it's like there's always something more you could do and you could be doing. But it's like, if I've fulfilled my duties in my job, why can't I do something else if I've got time for it?
You are allowed to do, but there is a legal stipulation that you can't do it from your office in Parliament. So what it came down to... Well, because it's a government office.
Why is it illegal, though? Why is it illegal just for somebody to do something other than Parliament business?
Because it looks like you're self-interested.
So
but what it came down to but I can see where this is going. But what it came down to was he was too lazy to go from his office in Parliament and walk to his second home in London and basically do his business from there rather than his office in Parliament.
But you don't know. That might have been like a 50-minute journey on the tube or something.
It's a separation of church and state. Like, you're being...
It's about money. I think it's about money.
They get paid like $100,000 a year.
Yeah, which is pretty good. But the fact is,
puts them in the top. Is it 10% or 20%?
Must be.
If you owe,
more like probably the top 5% or something.
Oh yeah, it's if you earn over 80,000. Is that the top 5 or 10?
Oh, the top. You mean tax bracket? That's like the top. I think it's like 5-10%. Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. So my heart's not bleeding.
No,
but please go on about that 50-minute commute that he could have been having to do.
Well, it's just the fact for me that it's obviously about money. They don't like him earning money doing something where they feel he could be doing Parliament business. Because it's like, if he'd have sat on his phone there playing Candy Crush in his downtime, would he have just got a slap on the wrist rather than he's moving about investment funds in Switzerland?
But I suppose it's like if you're on the board of another company or you're working for another company while you're in power, you can literally, like, if there's a bill coming up and it's an energy bill, and your company that you're on the board of is really shit about saving energy and pollutes a lot.
All right, well let's
you're going to vote no on something because it's going to affect the company that you're affiliated with.
Let's have
when it becomes dodgy.
Let's have a hypothetical scenario here.
Okay.
Let's say you are an individual who works in a management position of a company. Yes. You earn £80,000, but you have a lifestyle where you have 4 children, and that's not, people tend to live to the maximum of their means.
Yes.
With, to the limit of their means.
By the way.
Whatever their means are, they tend to live to the limit of it. Meaning, like, if you've got 4 kids, you will probably dote on them more to the best of your ability that somebody who has less money could. Not because you love your child anymore, but because you have your money in the pocket to do so.
Yes.
So let's say you're in a management position or a middle management. You earn £80,000 a year. Your dad's just died, and he has left you to be the beneficiary of his business, which might have been a property business or something. And now, because you still want to manage that business because it was your father's wish, and also it's going to bring in more money for you to enable your lifestyle to be better, but you don't have time for it. But what you might be able to do is, in the few moments you have at work, is manage your tenancy, business, your property business.
Yes.
From that aspect, in your lunch breaks, in the 10 minutes you can between meetings.
I completely agree with that as a point. But the fact was, there was a legal stipulation that says, no, you can't do that. And like, if you're at a job where someone said, yeah, you know what, we understand you need to do this, just please don't let it affect your work, and yes, you can do this from your office. Absolutely cool. I think most companies would be fine with it. But there was a legal stipulation that said, do not do this. So
that's the difference between Parliament and everyone else. Is like, why is it a legal stipulation?
Because you're an elected official. You're a spokesman of the people.
So as I was just mentioning with the scenario with the guy and his job, for most other people, that is just a contractual stipulation to say that, well, it's a conflict of interest and you're not now fulfilling your job role. So therefore, we as your employer have right to say, well, we feel you're not fulfilling your job role, so therefore we need to employ somebody who does. But from a parliamentary perspective, I feel like it's just arbitrary that they've said it's now a legal thing rather than just a contractual thing. Because it's the exact same standard you're being held up to. It's just that we've made it law for some reason because they've got a job in Parliament.
I can understand the viewpoint. I'm just very much in favour with all things of like that separation of church and state.
Right.
And I feel like as an elected official, you probably should be expected to really separate your life effectively away from being a public servant and being a corporate overlord or whatever they do.
But the fact of what you have to realise is that they're only in power potentially for 4 years, aren't they?
Thank God. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like if you went into something thinking I could only have this job for 4 years, you might want a few other ideas cooking in case you never get back to that job. And that's the problem with the parliamentary system. Is like, well, Either you say there's job security here, and although you're not in power, there's something for you to do around Parliament, so you've got a wage, and therefore we're taking away that self-interest where we won't feel like everyone needs a second or a third business. Or you have to say, well, it's the nature of the job that by the will for the people have decided that you're no longer in power. It's like, oh, well, I'm now actually quite glad that I've got my my dad's property business that I've inherited because I'm actually out of a job now.
Actually, you know what? No, I've gone full circle on this, and I will now actually concede. Well, no, I've not gone full circle. So I will. So basically, what you're pointing out is a very basic structural problem with how politics works and how one becomes a politician.
Yes,
because there is no politics school, well, apart from Eton. But that's just where you rub shoulders with other rich people, really. Yeah. But there is no, as a through line to politics, you pretty much have to financially support yourself until you become elected.
Exactly.
So of course, the only people that are able to do that are what? Ding, 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 rich already.
Yeah.
So mummy and daddy can support you or whatever while you are trying to set yourself up as a politician.
Yes.
So I do concede that, yes, if you because you do not have that job security, you have to make your money either after or while you're there.
Because the fact is,
before and after.
Until you get elected, politics is a side hustle, isn't it? Until the moment you get elected, even when you're campaigning, politics is basically a side hustle.
But also, I mean, that's what's fucked in America, isn't it? That with presidents, for example.
Yeah.
After you get elected, you've got to raise £10,000 a week. Or is it? No, I think that might even just be a senator or something like that. You've got to raise $10,000 a week from the second that you're in your seat just to stand for re-election.
They start raising money for their re-election campaigns, basically, from the word go, don't they? So they have enough money.
Exactly.
And when they say donations for election campaigns, what they mean is marketing.
Well, they mean marketing, but also, like, if that's not fucking clearly bribery, I have no idea what is.
Yeah. Well, it basically, that's why I think they put a spending cap on it, didn't they? I think they have a spending cap of like $1 million or something.
I think they did something, didn't they? Yeah.
Or in Britain, there's a spending cap of so much. Because it basically means then that we've all got the same campaign and therefore we're all having the same reach as each other. Because it could end up being the difference between, like, I don't know, Lush and Coca-Cola, where Coca-Cola's got a massive reach because of their marketing budget, but Lush is just like a reasonably big but still like mid-level cosmetics company.
Well, it's back to my kind of Corbyn point, isn't it? That it's really whoever has the most money wins, and you want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I do
also,
agree.
I don't know to cut you off. I don't know if you can hear this on the microphones, but it sounds like I think several political parties are trying to break into my flat.
Yeah, that is in fact a combination of the far left and the far right.
Yes.
Breaking down the door to come and black bag us, isn't it?
Yes, and I'm quite glad that we've managed to at least make them come together for something, if that is what's happening.
That is a pizza place next door being built, isn't it?
It is. And
it better be fucking worth it.
It better be good, and probably with that, my cholesterol will go sky high. But that's just. But anyway, sorry. Your point was something.
I can't remember what my point was.
I can't remember what your point was now. It was about political. Yeah.
I, for one,
money. It's soft and hard money, isn't it? And just, bribery and all this marketing. It's all bollocks. Everything's a lie. Don't try. Just give up.
I mean, I, for one, do agree that there should be a spending cap on campaigns. I mean, that seems pretty the reasonable person would probably agree with that. But it just seems pretty self-explanatory that there should be a spending cap on a campaign.
Absolutely.
Or if anything, there should be a taxpayers' fund that goes into it. And then when it comes time for the next election, the two biggest contenders get a share of it. It's like it should come out of everyone's pocket rather than it being privately funded. Because in fact, you could spin that as, well, it's to everyone's benefit that we're all well informed and we're all voting for the right person. So actually, because that's to our benefit, it should come out of the taxpayer's pocket to fund people. But the problem with that is then you get to a point where you have to say, well, who deserves how much money? Because you have the two major parties and then the centrist one. But then the smaller parties, they're going to be like, well, why are we giving the Green Party just as much money?
Yeah.
But the fact is, if that happened, maybe the Green Party would get more votes.
I mean, I think they might have to have better people in charge first. But I mean, I'm really annoyed that you brought this up now, simply because it's quite a good debate around, for example, the whole Leave Remain debate, and basically actually how those debates and side of the argument were funded, because there was some pretty dodgy shit that went on with that funding of that, and also as well the marketing model that was used through Facebook, for example. So Facebook advertising, so I'm kind of in marketing as well at the moment, and Facebook marketing was used to an evil level, where they had every little thing of data about you and would personalize ads to basically stoke up your fears.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter that they were potentially misinformation. Like no, lies. It was just the fact that they got the ads out there.
And they got the ads out there, and they were bloody effective. And they used it as a test, which they then used on the Trump campaign in America. The same guys that basically were helping. Anyway, this is a broader debate and something that, that happened basically, but it does mean that you effectively got to a place where you could buy elections.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of what happened with the Leave. I mean, also, don't be wrong, Remain as a campaign were absolutely useless.
Yeah, with that particular campaign,
but,
what the left could have done was make a statement, or at least had a decisive party line that they were towing, saying, well, either we're for it or we're against it. Because I think what happened was Jeremy Corbyn, who was head of the Labour Party at the time.
Jeremy, you tried.
Yeah, he left it until about a week before or something, didn't he, to say, I'm against Leave or something like that.
But he wasn't. I mean, that was...
No, I know, on a personal level, his track record shows he probably wasn't. But again, this leads to another point with politics, is that they're not... My point I came back to before, which was that they're not holding politicians up to the same standards as everyone else. Because for you and me as individuals who aren't in politics, a reasonable person would say to us, you're allowed to change your mind over the course of your life. You grow as an individual. You're allowed to have a different viewpoint to what you had when you were 20.
Yes.
So therefore, Jeremy Corbyn's track record from his past, even though he's held a certain viewpoint on Northern Ireland or on being in the EU in the past, he came out at that moment and said, I'm against it. And it was like, well... And then everyone started going on about his track record. And it's like, well, does it really matter about my track record? I'm telling you what I believe right now and what the party line is right now.
Yeah, but so he came out as wanting to leave.
Yeah, I think so, didn't he?
No, sorry, he wanted to remain. That's what he did.
Yes, that's what... Yeah, he was against Leave.
But he fully wanted to leave. Like, that was the...
On a personal level.
On a personal level. And like and to be honest, I could understand why he'd want to leave. But what I find really funny now is how prophetic really a lot of... Because it was the first election I've seen where the experts were just there like, oh, these experts making up things. Like, no, they have doctorates.
Oh, these experts.
And masters. And they've devoted their lives to reading these statistics.
Using statistics and science.
Exactly.
And things that benefit us all that
and
we're afraid of.
Financial forecasts. But anyway, I just find it hilarious now that obviously fuel prices have gone up, food prices have gone up, fuel for housing and all of that stuff, prices are going up. The cost of living is rising. We can't get drivers in and out of this country to deliver food.
It's almost like COVID has been a saving grace for the Conservative Party in a sense that nobody's going, well, you really fucked up with that Brexit thing that happened, didn't you? Because they're too focused on COVID now.
Well, and also they just go, oh, it's all COVID's fault. No, it wasn't. No. You were told this was going to happen.
The HGV shortage is definitely the fact that...
Oh, it's fully Brexit.
Yeah.
It is fully Brexit. The reason that they're having to pay truck drivers $50,000 a year to make them do it.
Yeah.
Like, which is, not knocking truck drivers as like a profession.
No, but it's supply and demand. It's the fact that they're not allowing the blokes from Europe to come over here and do it now.
Yeah. Like, they won't let them.
Yeah.
It's because they did that skilled labour thing, didn't they? That we tried to do the Australian method of letting immigrants into this country. That
they have to meet a certain standard before they're allowed to come in.
Crap. Which then I remember from that. They then were so stupid, they put the bar a little bit too high, so then you couldn't have foreign nurses and doctors in.
Yeah, it's in theory. In theory, that works if we're living in some sort of utopian sci-fi world where everyone's
where the British public aren't actually stupid.
Exactly, and everyone's got everything they need. But the fact is, we still need people to do like basic labour jobs.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it's controversial to say, but there's probably a correlation between how much education you've had, and therefore what jobs you feel like doing, because you're going to get bored in a job that is below your station.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm not decrying any type of work. It's just like from an intellectual perspective, if you're doing a menial job, you're not gonna stick in it if it's not challenging you.
You need a way to switch off, or potentially a family to be working for, and I suppose that then becomes your motivation. But yeah, no, I do agree that yeah. Anyway, before we managed to get ourselves cancelled after a first episode of a podcast, I think there's been a lot of interesting debate come out of this, and I think
sure.
And I think the next podcast will structure slightly more, but at the same point, I have quite enjoyed The Wandering.
I don't think I've been that right-leaning. What do you think was my most...
I don't think you've been that right-leaning.
What was my most Nazi point I made?
Well, thank you for that. Too right-leaning. I can't remember. There was a point where, to be honest, I think you're a fairly reasonable person.
Probably the point where I tried to stick up for the politicians having side hustles, really.
Oh, yeah, that probably was.
That's probably going to go down as quite right.
But again, that was actually, it's not even, you just go down as a capitalist.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between capitalist and right and and we will go into this at length in the next podcast, I think. Because one of the things I had written down was capitalist ideas versus communistical ideas. Why can't there be a middle ground? And that's what I'm going to base the next episode of this podcast around.
There is a middle ground, and it's literally a ground. It's called Scandinavia. They're making it work, and we need to adopt their model.
And if you want to hear more on that, please tune in next time. Thank you very much for listening. Tom, thank you.
Take care, everybody. Take care.
And I've been Jake, and please don't cancel us. And I don't want to tell you where I live. Anyway, okay. Bye for now.
Goodbye.